So let's get to it. The plan for today is that the first bit will be about us talking about kind of the theoretical approach to taking action after you've completed a survey and you've made some sort of analysis, you've come to some sort of conclusions. What should you do next when you're at this moment? And we'll split that up into two bits about hosting meaningful conversations about your conclusions about the survey, and then how to get to those priorities for really finding that true improvement based on your survey results. Then we'll have some examples from Adrio customers. Depending on time, we may have 2 examples or 1, being mindful that I know Alison may have later. And then finally, based on what you hear from these examples and what you've heard in the presentation before that, we'll open up the discussion to all of you in this kind of best practice forum. What does success look like to get from those survey results into that action? And hopefully you'll be open to sharing some of your ideas with the group. So to get everyone on the same page, and I think this won't be anything new.
The teacher that I ended up going to her house for one of the parties.
I'll ask people to stay on mute. Yeah, so to get everyone on the same page, this isn't anything new, hopefully, to you. You've all seen our strategic feedback cycle. And I think it's important to kind of refresh and remind ourselves what comes before taking action, because there's a lot of work that goes into getting you to this point that you set your goals before you think about what kind of survey you want to do. You carry out a survey that is designed to ask the questions that are connected to the goals, getting you that information that you're looking for from your stakeholders. You get the message out to the stakeholders. Hopefully you've gotten a robust response rate. And then when you go into the analyzing results, and especially if you have joined us in our previous webinars about results analysis, that you really structure the way that you go through your analysis so that you are looking at the big picture, filling in the context of your organization, but also really linking what the results are telling you with that initial goal that you set. And that, from there, takes us to this taking action. How are those conclusions that you make from what your stakeholders are telling you in their feedback, how is that going to fit into your improvement plan, to your strategies, to the things that you are working on as an organization now? And that's what we'll talk about today. And if you have been in those previous sessions with us, these slides won't be too new to you, but this is that kind of idea that we know that people run surveys, we know that people collect feedback, but this transition to taking action on that feedback is something that even stakeholders in our national data say that they don't see that follow through, or they don't see that connection from their feedback having an impact. So only 34% of staff seeing their feedback to leadership having an impact. 36% of parents seeing their feedback to the school has an impact always or most of the time. And even pupils saying that they don't really see that their pupil opinion is very valued. So we know that it's important to get that action after we collect results, after we collect feedback from our stakeholders, but it can be a little bit difficult to do that. And the point that I hope that we can help you see more clarity around is that all that work that you have done to set your goals, to carry out the survey, to really analyze the results, and getting that now into action, if we don't make that follow through, if we don't really complete that loop as it is in our cycle, all that work that you've done will be wasted, and that'll be very disappointing for you and for your stakeholders, who next time when you try to do new surveys or get their feedback in different ways, they won't be as bought into that process. So what can we do about it? Let's jump into how we can take action, and to help us kind of organize what taking action means, we split this up into 2 parts. The first part that we'll talk about is how to host meaningful change-making conversations in your organization about the outcomes of the survey. And the second one will be, once you've had those conversations and you've gotten the right people around the table and you've gotten them into that problem-solving mindset, how can you then move from those conversations to setting priorities evaluating these solutions that you have available to you, and making sure that you have this clear timeline of how you want to monitor these implementation measures. Why are these meaningful conversations so important? That's because the best and most descriptive data are in the heads of the people around the table. They don't sit with us at Adurio. We can help you facilitate a wonderful survey, help you advise you on the types of questions you should ask. But the people on the ground who are working with these topics that you've included in your survey on the day-to-day, they are the ones who have that experience, that lived experience, that knowledge of the pains and the successes that are going on. It is about getting the data from your survey into the hands of the people working on these issues day-to-day. So what do we mean by that? Who are these people that we have to get this data into to? And this is that big overlying question: who needs to see this data for something to happen? Who is working with these issues on a day-to-day basis? The first element of that is that power role, and this will depend on the type of organization that you're working in. If you're just a school, if you're a trust with many schools working across the survey, but whatever this power role is that you're getting ready to show this data to, they have to accept it as valid and reliable. So for example, if you as a trust are really keen to improve pupil behavior across the trust, because there are issues that are happening across all of your schools, if you cannot get the power role within a school, for example, the head teacher, to work with this data from their survey, you won't be able to see and feel that change happening in that specific school. But if you can get that buy-in and get that power role, the head teacher in this example, to accept the data as valid and reliable, then you'll have them preaching from the same hymn sheet, getting their people on board to work around this. And then, of course, the stakeholder groups themselves, getting them to feed back into it. So using the same example about pupil behavior, how can you get staff looking at some of the data, having them problem solve around this, about what you found in the data, and get their input about it, so that they can kind of see, oh yeah, I connect my role and my experience with that. I've already thought about some ways that we could maybe work on this. Let's do that together now. And the idea here is that we're getting people excited to move forward and ready for problem solving. How else are you going to have to share information in this moment? You may have to share up to a highest authority to give them some sort of summary of the results and get their input on it. Across the trust, how is the executive team going to be working with these results? How do you want them using those results to make their decisions, or to strategize around these issues that you've made from your conclusions? In the school level, how are you going to help and support your head teachers to then work with their staff, their pupils, and their families within their context around the data that they find from the results? And then there may be examples where you have to kind of split up the data into these nitty-gritty subgroup levels. Maybe you want your behavior lead to work on the behavior module from your survey. Maybe you want your HR person to work on the staff workload issues from your survey. So figuring out who is going to be working with what data, and kind of thinking about how you can spread that agency to get people working on it. Amy, over to you on some tips and tricks on reflections on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my role in this webinar is to kind of interject with a few kind of stories from customers and what we see as a CSM working with all of you guys at Adurio. So I think the first thing we can talk about here is just splitting your groups of people that need to be informed, that will be working on these results, into those that have Adurio access and those that don't. The ones that do, a couple of things to remember as you kind of grow this project, as it grows arms and legs, and you start kind of working on different focus groups, having conversations, and they develop in certain ways. You can always add more people to see the platform. And don't be afraid, you know, we set all of your survey admins up either at trust level or school level, whatever's most appropriate, right at the beginning when we're planning the survey. That is going to naturally change. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us and say, you know, so-and-so needs some access. The other thing around access to Adureo is right when we're planning and designing the survey, we have a conversation about where it's most appropriate for your heads to start engaging with the data. Should they, on day one of the results being available, get an email, log in, see everything on the screen and get stuck in? That's fantastic if you're quite, you know, the process is really embedded and it's quite a robust process in your organization. If it's your first year, quite often what we'll do is we'll lock those results, give the central team a bit of a head start, but don't forget to unlock those results for the heads. It seems really simple, but it's such a key part, because we do want the organizations themselves to, you know, continue that momentum of the survey and of course own their own data. And then think about the people that are going to be involved. They are going to be working and need to be informed of the results, but they're not necessarily working on that kind of top strategic level. For example, for a pupil survey, very easy to say, you know, don't forget to inform the schools what's happening. Don't forget to inform the respondents themselves so they feel the impact that their feedback has been listened to and valued. But of course, the parents are going to want to know what the pupil results said as well. So just thinking again about, and I think Imanta's going to go into in a moment, the different methods of that communication and what's most appropriate for different groups, but just remembering to consider, you know, you've got the people that have access to Adureo, what do they need, what are their needs, how are they different, and again the same for those that don't have access to our platform.
And kind of leading into what you said, so from there we have to think about how we're going to prepare these results in an accessible way for these stakeholders and the groups that we're talking to. So each group is going to need a different kind of way of communicating, right? We're not here to say that you have to share all of the results with all of your stakeholders. That would be very overwhelming and wouldn't lead to very proactive working around this. So it is about curating and finding that focus for each stakeholder group and how you're going to communicate, and using the language that is appropriate and tailored to that group. And how are you going to do this? This can be in something as big as a town hall meeting. You can host assemblies for parents or pupils. It can be a little bit smaller, like some sort of staff kickoff event or a staff meeting where you talk about the results and open up a discussion with the stakeholders. Or it can be something, you know, as simple as these visual sharings of information where you present a poster for the parents on a notice board or in the staff room. But all of these will require a different type of thinking about how you're going to present that message. What is the goal of that message, and how is that going to be perceived, and will it be perceived? Because just because it's on a board somewhere doesn't mean that someone will actually stop and look and read at what is said there. So if you need to get that message further or more directly to those people, thinking about how you're going to do that. And then we have to think about, okay, what is the best time to present the results? And from your analysis and the conclusions you've made about what you saw in your survey results, you should have a sense of the time it will take to present these. And these are some of the things that you can consider. So for example, if you're presenting to, you want to have one-on-ones with all of your school heads within a trust, that'll take considerably more time than writing an email to all the parents in your organization. So thinking about what are the goals and what do you want to get out of this meaningful conversation. But I do want to add that, you know, where possible, it is advisable to do it in person so that people can ask questions right away, and that you, as the person kind of presenting this information, can address any concerns before they become problems. So this is about kind of nipping it in the bud, getting ahead of the things so that you can keep that positive momentum going, so you get that positive energy, helping people be on board so that they want to start to get to that problem solving. And then once you're in the room with your stakeholders getting ready to present this information, what should you include in that summary? At the very basic, we say start with a big heartfelt thank you that they took the time out of their busy schedules to give you the feedback that you were asking for. Then we provide them with that summary of the strengths and the areas for improvement, being as objective as possible. and really thinking about how you're going to help the stakeholders see that the data they're being showed is valid and that they feel that connection to their roles and responsibilities. So this may mean kind of refreshing all the work that you did ahead before in the cycle, talking about how and when the survey was live, what was the response rate like, how did you choose the questions, what were the goals behind that, and then how did you come up with that analysis? What did you think about? What other data sources did you explore to come up to the conclusions that you did? And helping them kind of really visualize, okay, yes, I can see myself in this. I work with these issues day to day. I have an idea. I resonate. This resonates with me as a person working in an organization. And then, of course, because this feedback is a human process, we have to prepare for different reactions from our stakeholders and the people in the room and around the table, right? And the human element of feedback can really either push forward into positive action or really halt the process at this time. So being prepared as the person kind of curating and managing this process, helping them see the positive in this, facing the negative with an open mind and a curious mind of like, what can we learn from this? Being objective and really just saying what you see in the data, not judging the data, not jumping to any conclusions. And if you do ever sense that you're faced with this defensive or dismissive behavior, then having them kind of back on those feelings of validity, were there any problems around the process of the survey, how that was run, are there any issues with the content, and really trying to hone in that connection with the goal so that people remember why we ask these questions, what are we, what do we know now that we didn't know before that we can do differently going forward? Amy, some practical tips.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing to remember, especially when you're kind of putting those workshops together, if you are a trust and you're thinking about how to coordinate your schools and how to really kind of kick this off, the first thing is, even if you are a trust that, you know, it's a parent survey, there's only so much that we can do centrally. This is something for the schools to own themselves. It is still kind of well within your kind of remit to facilitate those conversations, organize those workshops, and allow for that collaboration. I think any of my customers that are on this call will be very, very familiar with me saying the word collaboration, especially within this context of kind of getting the most out of your results. One really, really good tip that we've heard, actually not from one of my customers, but again, certainly my customers have heard me kind of share it as an idea. Rather than all of your head teachers having time to digest their results privately, I think that's very important, and then coming together collaboratively, rather than everyone just sharing one thing that went well for them and one thing that they're looking to improve. That's excellent, you know, transparency, openness, and the ability to then share best practice. But it is quite kind of broad and shallow. Instead of that, if all of your heads can kind of come with one thing in their back pocket that they know that they are hoping to improve and that they've got a listening ear out for any advice going around, and then rather than coming with this thing went well for us, you know, tell us why. What are some initiatives that you have in place in your school? Write us a small case study, you know, 5-10 minutes. How have you achieved these results? And then if everybody, especially if you do recommend that they use the kind of compare your results to the trust average, if that's what they've used to pull their things that went well and that one thing they're listening out for, by a kind of default, everyone will hear some best practice around the thing that they are looking to improve. Another little quick tip is just to not forget that there are easy ways to export the data off platform. If you are having and facilitating these conversations, and some people do have platform access, other people don't, there are tons and tons of ways of getting one pages out of the platform, just downloading individual questions, modules, including or excluding those comments that we all know can be both the most valuable context-giving areas of the platform, but also some of the most sensitive areas. But yeah, being very mindful that that is available, and that can be just as powerful in these workshops as kind of having the results platform up on the screen. We want to kind of move that conversation away from the raw data into the minds of the people around the table. And then what we've got now is a couple of examples of what your matrix view or what your kind of the difference between the school results might look like for you coming out of the survey. And odds are you'll have a mixture of both. Here is an example where actually all of the schools are quite aligned. They can work collaboratively together to find the solution to a common problem or a common challenge that is going on across the whole of the organisation, and that can be tackled quite kind of collaboratively together. And the next is an example where all of the schools, as you can see, have different areas of strength and weakness. And this is, again, a really, really good idea for one of those conversations that I just mentioned, where everyone comes with, okay, well, Brook Primary, they can tell us how they've achieved such fantastic results on question number 36. And then when East Riverside is talking about their results for question number 38, Brook Primary can be having their little listening ear open and learning about some of the things and some of the work that goes on in that school. And completely appreciate that different schools will have different contexts, but certainly allowing for that kind of case study approach is much more meaningful to the other heads around that table.
Yeah, and just kind of finishing up this idea about practical things that you can use, using an agenda for a meeting, which this example is available on your dashboards when you log into your platform. Having an agenda can really help these conversations happen, especially if you can share it ahead of time. That will make it clear for everyone who's involved what will go on, how people are expected to participate. It gives them some sort of kind of that anchor to work off, and this can really settle any of those fears, doubts, or anxieties about what this kind of feedback meeting may entail, especially if you're kind of testing the waters about how this kind of approach may work. I really, really suggest that you think about how you could put to good use an agenda. And it also helps people kind of not worry that this isn't about punishing or fearing anyone into thinking that they've done so poorly because of bad results or something. This is about working together and problem solving and sharing in our experience. So now to kind of transfer from those meaningful conversations into setting priorities, kind of a flow chart of how feedback creates energy. And the first part of this is that feedback has occurred. You've run your survey, you've looked at the results. What is the energy that is created by the feedback that you collected? Have you looked at your Durio platform? You said, okay, that's good enough. And you haven't logged back in, and there you left it. That means there's not a whole lot of energy being created, no big change is going to be happening. But if you do start thinking about it, you've come to those conclusions about what you see in the results, yes, you can have that forward momentum of that energy. And that's where the meaningful conversations come in. What is the direction of this energy now? You're hosting these conversations. Are you being able to get people into that positive direction of using the data to identify and solve problems? Or are you kind of stuck in that denying or fighting of the data, and you're not really sure how you're going to work with it? No one's really excited. Then you're faced in that resistance anxiety. Not much change is going to be happening with those results. You won't be able to get into that action phase very easily. But if you can get into that problem-solving state of mind, the next big thing that we have to talk about is how you can make sure that you're setting yourself up for success by having clear structures and processes to turn that energy into true action for your schools and trusts. So if we don't have these structures and kind of supports in place, it'll be really hard to keep that momentum going. You'll try to kick off some sort of initiatives, but you may just be facing this frustration or failure because there's no follow through. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. But by having clear structures in place with clear priorities of what work you want to get done, you can get your organization into that positive change for action. So that's what we're going to talk about now. It's very important to set priorities. And from the conclusions that you have made based on your survey results, you will have some topics that you know are problem issues that you want to work on. So those are those priorities that when we're talking about here. What are those things that you want to see improve in your future surveys? One of those priorities, okay, split them up into ones that you think you have solutions for and that you may not have solutions for. And of the ones that we have solutions for, let's look for the ones that will be yielding us a high impact for our stakeholders, that they will feel wowed by the changes that have been made, but that will be maybe a little bit less effort. Those, we call those the quick wins, that you can really say that, yes, we've done this, and it has made a positive change for the people working in this organization. Be mindful of the priorities and solutions that you choose that would be a high effort, because that could really impact the workload and the way the staff work day to day around these topics. And if any of the solutions that you have fit into that low impact category, just be very mindful that it may feel very underwhelming when you put something into place and you start working on it, but it doesn't have that maybe wow factor. It may help some people, but it may not have that impact that you're truly looking for. And from there, we're thinking about, okay, we have these solutions, we're ready to start working on them possibly. How feasible are these for us, for our context, for our organization where we are right now? Does, for example, a pupil behavior improvement strategy, does it have administrative support? Does it have staff support? Are the staff trained to work on this strategy to improve pupil behavior? Do we have available training or funding or other resources? Are we ready to plan the time to monitor and go forward with this? But really being critical about, are these solutions that we're choosing based on what we found in our survey data, is that going to work for us? And are we ready to go forward with it? Amy, over to you.
Back to me. Yeah, so the first one there is around what we call the traffic light principle. I think what Imanta just showed around, these are the things that don't have solutions, these are the things that do. Of the things that do, we can kind of put them into these buckets. That's fantastic when you're talking with your strategy team, with your project team, in terms of then communicating those priorities back out to your stakeholder groups. The traffic light principle is essentially a way of you being able to share those priorities, and it's really friendly with all that you can do it with your pupils as well as your staff and your parents. Essentially, you've got your greens, those quick wins that we spoke about. This is what you said, and this is the next step that we're going to take to resolve that solution. Ambers, these are more likely some longer term next steps. These are, you've told us that we need to look to improve X area, and would you like to join a focus group to help us figure out what to do next? Those types of longer term projects that are going to be high effort, but they are going to have high impact as well. And then red, there are always going to be things in a survey that get said that you aren't going to focus on this year. That's either because they're not a priority or because there is a blocker, and that blocker can be anything from government regulations to no, you can't use your phone in the classroom. And really and truly, it's the most important one to communicate, because there is nothing more frustrating from a respondent point of view than spilling your heart out, telling everyone what you want to see in the school, and then no one addressing it and not knowing why. So if you do have things in the red, feel free to kind of communicate that as well with the respondent group in that kind of traffic light system. And that shows, we are listening to you. Here are some things that you already see the impact of. Here are some things we're working on. And don't worry, we have listened to you. And there are some reasons why we can't address the following. The next is kind of understanding where an area might go from that amber into a green. So make sure that if you're thinking of something as an amber and we need to completely scrap this policy and start from scratch and rebuild an entire process, dig a little bit deeper. Is it simply a communication breakdown? Is it that we need an entirely new policy around lesson planning, because our last 12 months have been spent pooling resources together and giving everyone access to some lesson plans, and now we don't need to spend so much time on lesson planning? Oh, but this year's survey has told us that actually a lot of our staff aren't very happy about the amount of time they're still spending on that activity. We need an entirely new policy. Taking a step back and actually appreciating this could just be, we don't know where to find it. We haven't signposted the support or the resources as well as we thought we had. Do you know the password? Are you aware of this new process that we brought in last year? So being mindful of some of those things that might be quick wins hidden behind some potentially more kind of, masking data. And also thinking about the time that it takes to see progress. There are some things that you'll C in your survey this year, and by next year they'll be flying. That's fantastic. That's really exciting to see. But there are going to be some things that you might have addressed last year that are on their way. They just take a little bit more time. So if you're looking at those national benchmarks that we provide, remembering that if you do have the benefit of your own historic benchmarks, to go back, take a look. Yes, you might be slightly under the national benchmark, but are you moving in the right direction compared to your own historic benchmarks? Are you making the progress at the rate you want it to be? Is this still a priority and it just needs to tick along for another year or two, or does that need to change slightly? And just asking those questions. And then the last one there isn't a weird lesson from me about circles and triangles. It is around using the data that you've got as well as the surveys. So doing a 360, what we mean by that is we mean looking at the entire context, the entire puzzle, not just the piece you're holding, the piece you're holding being the survey you've just done. So we can look at, you know, if we take student behaviour as a topic and we've just done a parent survey and that's come out as an area for us to look at and investigate, well, let's look at the staff survey that we just did that also asks about student behaviour. Let's ask the students themselves and their survey that they ran. There are some questions in there around that as well. If you've got that benefit of having multiple stakeholder groups, that can really help prioritising. If you've got one topic over here and another topic over here, you can use the other surveys to help you distinguish, okay, what needs to be at the top of that list. And the same with triangulating your data. That's more referring to looking at, you know, all of the other wealth of data that schools have. If there's one thing that schools aren't short of, it's data. So looking at your kind of all your MIS data, all of your appraisals, your Ofsteds, the list goes on, and using that data to help you prioritize the data from the survey as well.
Thank you so much. And then from there, once you've made that list of solutions that you want to work on, you've figured out how feasible they are, they do connect with your other data that you have around you, it's time to make that timeline. And that timeline is about how you're going to work on seeing improvement in this specific area. So if we're using that same example of pupil behavior, where do you want to see your survey results in pupil behavior in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time? And that big question around that is, what does success look like for your organization? And how are you going to communicate that success to your stakeholders and to the people working on improving pupil behavior? So how will you know that you've reached your goal? What kind of data will you use for evidence? Do you think you'll use pulse surveys, smaller surveys to check in that people are working on this? Are you going to use other types of data that you want to see less behavior write-ups or something like that? How will you organize the work and how you collect the data along the way? And then the big part, how are you going to collaborate about this? How are you going to get people together to talk about their successes, their problems? How are you going to help them problem solve to keep going and to keep making this a priority? And to kind of visualize that, you know, we can split this up into 3 different time periods. What are the things that are happening on your day-to-day, short-term? What are people on the ground going to be doing to make this change happen? What are those medium-term kind of check-ins that you'll do to make sure that this is a priority, that people have been working on it? And then what is that long-term success measure that you're going to use to say that, yes, we've done X, Y, Z. Now we can say that we have improved pupil behavior in our organization. And these sort of topics, they're always going to be works in progress. So you can't say that it'll ever be truly finished. I think that's why our cycle also, it continues going, because this is a work in progress. But by setting these milestones for yourselves, by setting these deadlines for yourselves, it structures that process in a way that people see what work they have to do, what is expected of them, and it makes that communication and collaboration much easier because you have a clear structure to hold on to. And then, just like I just said, it's about following up and following through. How are things going? Are you making the progress that you wanted? What are the blockers? How are you addressing them? Are people working on this? Are people coming together on this? And finally, kind of also what Amy said, is this still a priority? There will be plenty of things distracting you from the conclusions you've made from your survey. And so many things will have changed from when you launched your survey to when you started thinking about taking action on your results. So how can you allow that flexibility. If you need to change course, using data to make that decision that, yes, this is no longer a priority because of something else, and being clear that that is okay, and communicating that along the way. And then from there, you keep using evidence and you're feeding that information back into your stakeholders, using simple things like you said, we did, so that next time when you ask that question, how often did you see that your feedback to the school has an impact? Hopefully your stakeholders will say, oh yes, I have been involved. I know how my organization uses my feedback. This is an embedded thing in your process that once stakeholder feedback is given, there's a clear course of action that you go through to make sure that the feedback is looked at, it's used, and it really informs the way that you make decisions in your organization. Amy.
Yeah, so conscious of time, I'm going to fly through this slide because I really want to hear from our customers that have really gratefully provided some extra context around what they're doing in their trusts. So the first one here is around pulse surveys, being mindful of them. 12 months is a really long time to be working on the same data. So just being mindful that, do we need to be checking in, and is a survey the best way of doing this? I mean, we're talking a lot about kind of, focus groups and workshops and other ways of collaborating, but actually being able to temperature check with an anonymous survey, is what we're doing working? Should we be continuing on the path that we're on, or do we need to kind of change tact? There are going to be lots of ways of monitoring that, but certainly a pulse survey is a really good one, thinking about, do we need to have one set of questions, 5-10 questions across our entire school, or should the schools themselves be running their own questions based on their different actions? And here is just a really great example of a kind of one of those follow-up posters, a way of informing around what a trust is working on, what's coming next, and exactly what it was in the survey in the first place that is kind of that they are using as a jumping off point for all of their school improvement this year.
Sorry. Yeah, and that kind of, to wrap up this theoretical aspect of the best practice about taking action, we really hope that this process, and by giving yourself structure when you go from your survey analysis into this taking action, can help you learn as an organization better about yourself, and at the end of the day, make yourself more effective. So by embedding some of these practices, starting with one thing, then trying the next year a different thing, learning about what works for you as an organization, to make sure that feedback is used in that as effectively as possible. And I think that by going through it systematically, you can really shift your approach from being reactive to problem solving to really co-creating your future as an organization by getting people on board and by working together. So by having an embedded process that helps kind of structure the work that you're doing, you can foresee the things that will be coming up along the road, and you won't be as reactive to the things that come up. So with that in mind, it's now time to hear from some of our customers. Alison, are you still on the call, and do you have a few minutes to share about your experience taking action based on your survey results?
Yeah, I am here still, just for a few minutes, and then I've got to do some training. So are you going to present the slides?
Amy can, yes. But if you can, it will probably help you know your story a little bit better.
Yep. Let me get that up for you. I think, Imanta, you need to finish your presentation, if you don't mind. And then Alison, I have yours right here.
That's brilliant, thank you. I was thinking of changing them even as Imanta was speaking. Yeah, just a quick whiz through. And actually, I was really heartened to hear what you were saying, because I was thinking, oh, I have developed some good practice, or we have developed some good practice across the trust. So if you go to the first slide, that'd be great. So the first thing I sort of decided to talk to you all about was the fact that we put in a timeline, and I decided to put the timeline back to over a year ago, because it sort of showed that so at the beginning of 2023, when we were coming into our second survey, so I was a bit more on board about what we really needed to do. I reminded the people that would be sort of supporting the launch of the survey, I reminded them to that it was going to be happening and why we were doing it, and I started promoting it with the leaders, and they, I would hope, would be promoting it with staff. So we did that back in January over a year ago, and then again this year we put that same process back in place. So it's not just a one-off. You have to keep revisiting that with your staff. And then we ran the survey in March, and we and then shared straight away, or pretty much straight away, the executive summary with the principals, but also the trust board. And I was just interested to hear that you were saying how important it is to share with the leaders, with people that will actually be able to influence something happening to all the data. So, you know, I was quite pleased I'd put that in board. And then actually what happened was the survey brought up something about workload, which I think probably everybody's surveys bring up. But so we did actually put that into our trust priorities across the trust. We're sort of quite a digital trust, and so we wanted to look specifically at the use of AI across the trust, and to see whether that supported the workload of our staff. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Then we came back in September, so that's sort of 6 months afterwards, and people started sharing. They were sharing successes that they'd had in their schools, and sometimes that they were successes that were related to what we put in place for the Ajurio survey. So I was always trying to keep it in people's minds, either at principal level, at school level, at trust board level, and we would use the data that we had. I'd sort of drop it into different slideshows and things like that. We set up the AI working party, which directly related to our trust priority. And then we also fed it into some survey work that we were doing and writing a report. So all the time, I think it just drip feeding it in. And as an executive, I've got the ability to do that, and so I sort of think it's really important that somebody, whoever's leading the survey, that they're supported by someone who can make things happen and sort of influence the workings of the trust. And then this year we have used the posters more, and we've made it more visual, so it's not just me sending out emails or talking. I've tried to make sure that we've got visual representations as well. And we've just had our first meeting with the principals talking about the results. That was very much me sharing. It wasn't as much of a workshop as I would have hoped. It was quite a small amount of time, but I did say to people, I can come and work with your schools. And so far out of 9 schools, 4 schools, I will be going in to do that bespoke work with them. So we have done an overall group response, but also there's the ability there to do the bespoke work with different schools. So if we go on to the next slide. And then, so I just took 2 case studies, really. It was one that Emma, when we were talking, said, oh, this would be really good to show. So I've sort of put our data from last year on for staff support and relationships, which we had 81% positive results, but we were sort of down on the benchmark in some places and down on our previous year. So then if we move on to the next slide, which shows this year, year, and this was one of our strengths this year, one of our sort of areas of improvement. We'd gone up to 86%, and we'd improved both against our last year's data and our and the national data. And so if you go on to the next slide, what we had really used was that you said we did model, and we'd asked principals for not just principals. I'd ask principals, but I'd also ask directors of different areas across the trust. So our administrative support or our premises support and things like that. We'd ask for their what they'd been doing to support staff relationships, and I've just put these in. So we had been trying to support on well-being. We'd tried to support on communication, and I would say that that's probably one of the biggest impactful things that happen to make the relationships better. These weekly briefings in every context, every school, and including it sort of as a briefing document, a recorded document, a recorded briefing, and an in-person briefing. But also now the different services are going to start doing briefings as well, not just in schools. So I think that people recognise that was really supportive to these relationships, that people felt that they were valued and felt that they had access to knowledge within the school. And then also from what people had said, we really supported the development of staff rooms and staff working places as well. And then also we tried to work on workload, which if we go on to that, I know I'm rushing. So last year, I think we were really disappointed by this slide, our time on tasks. We felt that we had put in place a lot of work already to do with workload, and our results, as you can see, are quite negative. So this time, if we look at what happened this year, they're still obviously lower than 50%, but they are 10% above the benchmark, which I think is, sort of favourable, and still not as good as last year in terms of our trust. But we have done a lot on AI. But what we realise from the result is that there are some people who have used it in their role, and those that have used it have found that it's been really effective for supporting them. And virtually every comment that was given was really positive. But what we've got to do is get to everybody. So it's that communication with the whole across the trust, not just those that sort of happen to be interested in it, not just the working party or something like that, which I think I've said on the next slide. Yeah, so so these are what we've done. So we've still got 51% of our 51% of our people said that they now used AI to support their. So that means 49% of our people aren't using AI, which obviously means that we've still got a big group of people that we could influence. And if that's the way that we think might support them, we need to get doing that. But people had really positive things to do it, and obviously our Wordle for that word cloud came out really well as well. So, and that has come directly from some of the results we got last year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. I recognize that you will probably have to jump off, if not right away, then very soon. So if anyone will have any questions, I think we'll email us the questions if you'd like us to send them to Alison. I think she'll be more than welcome, happy to answer them. Thank you so much. And now over to Claire. Let me share my screen once again, and I think Claire, you can just start talking.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much. I'm conscious of the time, so I will keep this short and sweet. But yeah, my name's Claire Gething. I'm Director of Communications at Windsor Academy Trust, and we're a trust of 15 schools. We've got 8 secondary schools and 7 primary schools. And really, this academic year, we've been through a period of significant growth. We finished the end of last academic year as 9 schools, and we're now 15 schools. There's been a lot of change going on, and we've wanted to make sure that during that process we stay very much connected to our front line, to our staff, to our students, and also to our parents as well. And I guess that's the big why for us in terms of why we've gone down this route of doing the stakeholder feedback surveys. So we've done 2 so far this year. So it's the first time that we've done them. We've done the staff experience survey, and we've also done the student experience and wellbeing survey. And we're due to do the parent one in the summer. So I think we're looking to do that in June. And I thought I'd just share with you a little bit with what we did with the results in terms of the process, to try and make sure that that was as simple as possible, because the survey itself is fairly simple to administer, but the work comes when you've got those results, and making sure that you've got a really simple process, that you've got a clear timeline, and you've also built in the capacity within your central team, but within your schools to deliver that as well is really important. And some of our learnings have mostly been around capacity. So I suppose the first thing that we did when we got those results was we looked at that as an executive team. And that kind of kicked off our very simple way of looking at our results that we then carried through into different groups across the organisation. And we basically asked ourselves to simply observe and answer 2 questions. And we collected the feedback to those 2 questions via a shared Jamboard where people could put post-it notes, and it just made things really, really simple. So we asked, what are we pleased with? So we could celebrate those successes, and what can't we live with? And we did that as an executive team. And then we did that again with all of our head teachers in the room as well. So all of our heads got their own school report so they could see exactly where they were as a school, but we also shared with them the trust-wide results as well. And we collectively agreed what we were pleased with and what we couldn't live with. We modelled that with their head teachers so they could then take that back to their school and do a similar process with their SLT. And then I supported them with doing that feedback session with as many of their staff as possible. So we were really transparent about the results, but we got the staff to then tell us what it was in particular they wanted to see changed within school. So we used that Jamboard process, and then in each school we were able to look at what staff couldn't live with, and then we took 3 to 5 of those kind of modules or themes or topic areas into focus groups with at least 10% of staff. And we tended to keep teaching staff together in one group and our professional services together in another group, rather than mix them, just so that we could get some really good debate and discussion going on in those sessions. And then the schools could take the notes from those focus group sessions and then build that out into their action plans. And that has worked really, really well for us as a process, just keeping it really simple. What are you pleased with? What can't you live with? You get to that really quickly. In those sessions are about 30 minutes, 10 minutes for people to have a copy of the report and look at that on their own in quiet, so they can make up their own mind, and then a 10-minute group discussion with the Jamboard on what we're pleased with, a 10 minutes on what we can't live with, and then bam, 30 minutes, you're done, and then you move on to the next part of the process. That has worked really well. We've done the same thing with our student survey, but slightly different, because that what we can and what we can't live with. We've also done that with our student senate, so our student leaders within school. And then when we've done the focus groups with 10% of students, we've got a member of SLT to lead that focus group with a member of our student senate. So it's not just the staff asking those questions, we've got students asking the questions to students as well and getting that feedback. And again, that's worked really, really well. So those action plans are now done, and I guess that's the vertical in each school. And then we're looking at that now horizontally. Where are the common themes across the family of schools, so we can take a trust-wide response. And then just from a governance point of view, we've presented all of this to our board. We have a people and culture committee. So we've gone in and we're presenting actually next month the action plan, the collective action plan coming out of the staff survey. And we'll be doing the same with our education performance and standards committee around the student survey as well. So we're really transparent with our board as well. They get to see those results and they get to see what we're doing with it. And they also get to challenge us on that as well. So that's really whistle stop because I'm conscious of the time, but hopefully that gives everyone a good flavour of, I guess, of a simple way of taking the results and moving them quite quickly towards action.
Thank you so much, Claire. Those examples were absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing your story. we have 4 minutes left. Would anyone else like to ask Claire any questions or anything else you'd like to share or questions you'd like to ask to the group? The floor is yours, as they say. You can also write in the chat if that's easier.
I wonder if it's just worth me picking up again, actually, on that capacity piece while we've got a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
one
please.
of the things that we did find is once you've got the results, and this quick, simple process, it is quick and simple, but schools sometimes finding the capacity to do that and the time to do that was a bit of a challenge. And I think that's one of the learnings for us, and making sure that we've got that built into CPL sessions or into staff briefings, so that there's space made for that, to have those discussions and to have those conversations. And also where as a central team you can go in and support. So one of the things I did was just say, look, let me come in and run those sessions for you. And actually sometimes it's easier for the staff to be more honest with someone that perhaps isn't their head teacher or a member of their SLT. But I think when you're planning your surveys, what I would say is really think about where the capacity sits in order to kind of deliver all of that follow-up. Make sure you've got that in place and a very clear timeline attached, because it will make a massive difference.
I just wanted to say thank you, Claire, for sharing that, because it's as simple as it was, it does sound really effective. It kind of just shook me awake. It was lovely to hear.
Good, I'm glad it was useful. It's the first time we've done it, and wasn't entirely sure what process to go down, but keeping it simple seemed to be the most effective way. And yes, there've been learnings along the way that we'll take into doing it again, but it certainly has worked well for us.
I think the 2 questions and the Jamboard and the 10 minutes each and the bit about capacity and planning, just resonates. But it does sound, it sounds like it's manageable in the way that you've conveyed it in terms of your story. It's really fired me up. Thank you for that.
No, that's okay. And the other thing that helped was just creating some templates. So I created templates for the focus group discussions, a report that could be filled in, just to really make it easy for schools and make sure it was really consistent in terms of how everybody was recording that information as well. So anything like that just takes some of the pain out of it for some of the schools.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please look out in your inboxes for an email from us for feedback about how you found this session and how we could make it useful for you in the future. And yeah, good luck with taking action on your survey results. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.